Hey friends, it's Lily and welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video. So in today's video I'm going to be talking about the Sapphic books that I want to read. So about 2 months ago now I did a recommendations video where I recommended 28 Sapphic books. If you haven't seen that video I will link it on the screen and also down below. But you seem to like that video, so I decided to do a follow-up one talking about the Sapphic books that are on my TBR and also ones that are on my wish list. I initially was going to incorporate these into that video, but that video was already half an hour long with just the recommendations, so I decided to split them up, and I have a feeling this one's also going to be quite long because there's quite a lot of books to talk about today. Before I get into the video, I do just want to direct your attention down to the description box because I am leaving a bunch of petitions and places you can donate to down below. I am particularly going to be trying to leave places you can donate to that are kind of black LGBTQ plus organisations, so please do go and check that out if you have the means to donate at all. It's really important to support these organisations during Pride Month but also throughout the year, so if you can donate regularly, if you can donate anything now, that would be greatly appreciated, and I'm going to leave like a bunch of petitions as well down below that I would really appreciate it if you check those out. Without further ado, let's get into the video. So I'm going to talk about the books that I physically own first. So the first one I want to talk about is the biggest book on my TBR and one that is on my June TBR, so I'm really hoping to read this still this month. It is June 11th when I'm filming this and I haven't started it yet, and I really need to get a move on because this is huge, but I'm hoping still to get it read this month. If not, I will at least start it this month and then maybe finish it in July. That is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I already talked about this in my June TBR, so I won't talk about it too much here. All I really know about it is that it is adult high fantasy and it is a standalone and there are dragons and lesbians in it, and that's basically all I know about it, and that's all I needed to know about it to pick it up. I have been really enjoying adult high fantasy recently, so this isn't as intimidating as it was initially when I picked it up, so I think I'm in a good mindset to go into it, and like I said, I'm hoping to start it soon. I'm hoping to start it this weekend if I can get kind of a start on it. I've heard pretty much nothing but good things about this, and I am excited to read a high fantasy book that is a standalone as well and not like feel too intimidated by a series, so I'm definitely excited to check this out and finally see what everyone's talking about. The next book was also on my June TBR, but I don't think I'm going to actually end up reading this month, which I'll explain in a second, and that is Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. So I was initially going to read this for the Historical Pride / Gays Gone By readathon that I was co-hosting, but we decided to just cancel it and postpone it for now just because of everything that is going on right now. We wanted to focus our efforts and our resources and our time on the Black Lives Matter movement, so we've postponed it for now. We will be doing it again in the future hopefully, but because of that I don't think I'm going to read this month just because it is pretty big and I have a lot of books on my TBR already for this month and books I really want to prioritise this month for various reasons, so I'm not going to be probably reading this in June after all, but I will hopefully read it soon. This is an adult historical novel. All I really know about it is that it's about a young woman called Sue who is an orphan in London, and she gets taken in by this kind of family of thieves, and she is somehow connected to another girl who lives in a mansion a few miles away, and I believe there's like a mystery at the heart of it. And Sarah Waters is an author that I've been meaning to try for a while. I believe she has a lot of kind of lesbian representation in a lot of her books, so I'm really excited to get to this hopefully soon. I think I will probably read this again for the Historical Pride readathon whenever that gets announced, which will hopefully happen before the end of this year. And then another book that was on my June TBR that I don't think I'm going to be getting to this month just because of various reasons, I think I'm going to swap it out for something else, is Girls of Storm and Shadow by Natasha Nyong. This is the sequel to Girls of Paper and Fire, which I mentioned in my Sapphic recommendations video, so I won't talk about it too much here because it is the sequel, but the series is basically a YA fantasy series inspired by Southeast Asian mythology, and we follow our main character Lee, who is a human in this world where demons kind of rule and are the ruling kind of caste. So there is the demon caste at the top, then there are half demons which are in the middle, and then humans at the bottom, and so Lee is kind of plucked from her town and taken to the king's palace to be one of his concubines, and she ends up falling in love with another of the king's concubines, which is forbidden, and everything kind of takes off from there. And I really enjoyed the first book. I have been meaning to get to the second book for a while. I even started it at one point and I didn't read it because I wasn't in the kind of fantasy mood at the time, and I was going to try and pick it up this month, but I think I'm going to swap it out, but I will hopefully get to it soon. I am thinking of doing like a kind of series September or sequel September thing because there's quite a few sequels that I want to get to and I keep putting off for whatever reason, so I may try and do something like that. I think it's already a thing, but if I don't get to it this year I'm going to be so mad because I've owned it already for a year. I need to get to it. I need to find out how the story continues. The next book I want to talk about is On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden. Tilly Walden's done a few graphic novels and I think quite a few of them are Sapphic, but this is just the one that I own and the one I'm probably going to start with, but I'm interested in quite a few of them. So this one I believe is about a girl who goes to a kind of space boarding school. It's set in space, and so she goes to kind of a space boarding school and she meets another girl there and they fall fall in love, but then they end up losing contact when they're adults. And so this is about our main character, who I think tries to convince her like space crew to basically go on a mission to find her long lost love. I believe that's the plot. It just seems really beautiful. Like, the art is absolutely stunning. I love all the different colours, and it just sounds like a story that is really soft and full of yearning, which are my favourites. So I will hopefully get to this soon, because I've been really wanting to start Tilly Walden's graphic novels for a while, and this just seems spacey and soft, which are all of the things that I love. We then have The Deathless Girls by Kira Millward-Hargrave. So Kira Millward-Hargrave is one of my favourite authors of all time. I've read all of her books that are out right now, except for this one. This was her YA debut, and this is a YA fantasy retelling. It's a retelling of Dracula, but basically we follow two of Dracula's brides that end up falling in love, and that's pretty much what I know about the plot. But I've heard really good things about this from a few people. I've heard really good things about it from Joe from Average Joe Reader, and also Jean from Jean's Bookish Thoughts. They've both spoken really highly of it, so I'm very excited about it. I love Kieran's works anyway. I really enjoyed her Sapphic book that she put out earlier this year called The Mercies, and I've been meaning to get to this for ages, and I need to read it. I need to find out what this book is all about, and hopefully I will love it as I've loved all of her other works. So we then have Soulkill Girls by Claire Legrand. So this is a kind of contemporary with some fantastical elements. I think it's got some horror elements to it as well. And all I know about this one is that it is set in New England, I believe. And there is this island called Soulkill Island, and there is this entity on it that is killing a bunch of girls from this town, and we follow three girls who basically are trying to get to the bottom of this to stop this from killing a bunch of the girls in their town. I believe all three of them are queer in some way. I know there is definitely a black asexual girl, and I believe there is also an FF romance, possibly between two of the main characters, but possibly between one of the main characters and another character. I've just heard this book is super queer and kind of creepy and perfect for autumn, so I've had it for a couple of years, and I always mean to read it in the autumn and then just don't for whatever reason, but I'm saying this year I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it this October, September, November time. It's gonna happen because it sounds great. Like, it's a book I think I could potentially really love, and I just have been putting it off for whatever reason, partly because I feel like I have to read it in autumn, but if I don't read it this autumn, I'm just gonna read it at some point because it sounds so good. The next book I want to talk about is one I'm really excited to read, and that is The Last Two Poets of the Sea by Julia Drake. This is a YA contemporary. We follow a young woman who is getting into kind of trouble, as people would view it, and then something happens to her brother, like some significant event. I think he either attempts to die by suicide or has a drug overdose or something like that happens to him, and so our main character gets sent away to this town that her family, I think, founded a few hundred years ago in Maine, and she basically ends up going to investigate this shipwreck that happened there a few hundred years ago that her family were also a part of, and she ends up meeting a girl there. There's a romance. I think there might be a love triangle in here as well, but I've heard really good things like about how that is handled, and it just seems like my kind of contemporary. It's summery, it's hard-hitting, it's got kind of a magical feel to it. I don't think this one actually has magical elements to it, but it's been compared a lot to Summer of Salt, which I love, and a lot of people who I kind of trust with these types of books have said amazing things about it, so I'm just really excited to read it. I think I'm going to try and read it in July because it seems like the perfect kind of summery read, and I think I could potentially give this 5 stars. I don't know, this might be a 5-star TBR prediction. We will see, but I'm so excited to get to this when I do. We then have The Never Tilting World by Rincha Pecco. So this is a YA fantasy. This, I believe, is set in a world where there are kind of two sides to the world. So one side is in everlasting sunlight and the other half is in everlasting darkness. And each side has one sister, and I don't think they know that the other exists, but both of them end up going on kind of a mission and leaving like their towns or their centres. That's all I really know about it. Honestly, I picked this up because I heard there was a Sapphic bodyguard romance and I was like, I'm there, I want to read that, please. And I've also read The Bone Witch by Rincha Pecco, and I really enjoyed it, and so I've just been kind of starting to acquire a lot of her books because I've heard such good things about them. So I'm really excited for this, although I don't know much about it. That is the story of most of these books, to be fair. I just hear that something's Sapphic and someone says it's good and I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll pick it up, no problem. I've seen a lot of people reading this lately though and giving this like really high ratings, so I'm definitely intrigued to start this, and I think this is the first book in a duology, and Rincha Pecco is just an author that I've been really enjoying so far and want to read more of their work. And then finally, for the physical books that I own that I want to talk about, we have We Unleash the Merciless Storm by Taylor K. Mejia. This is the second book to We Set the Dark on Fire, so this is the final book in the duology. That's a book I also talked about in my Sapphic recommendations video, so I won't talk about it too much here, but it's basically set in a kind of low fantasy dystopian society. There's this kind of island, and the outer ring of the island has a lot of the kind of oppressed and marginalised population, and then the inner ring is where a lot lot of the elite privileged people live. And so our main character is from the kind of outer ring, but she has kind of infiltrated the inner ring when she was a child and has been going to this kind of elite boarding school there under the guise that she's actually from there. And in this society, the elite men have two wives. So they have a primera and a segunda, and the primera is kind of the public facing role, is kind of their confidant and kind of someone they bounce off ideas with about politics, and the segunda is kind of the homely kind of wife who does a lot of the kind of stuff around the house and bears children and everything like that. So our main character becomes a primera to this very powerful man in society, but she ends up actually falling in love with the segunda in her household, and then there's also like stuff about revolution and overthrowing kind of this really oppressive government and everything like that. The last book ended quite explosively from my mind, and I'm really excited to see what the sequel has. This one I believe is told from Carmen's perspective, who is the segunda who our main character in the first book falls in love with, so I'm really interested to get her perspective and just finish out the story because I really did like the first one. So then I just want to talk about a couple of ebooks. So I do own these books, but I just don't have physical copies with me. So the first one I want to talk about is This Is How You Lose a Time War. This is by Amal El Matar and Max Gladstone. This is a adult sci-fi book that is about two time travel agents who are on opposing sides of this war and are basically writing letters to each other, and at first it's to kind of throw each other off and like it's really like kind of nasty rhetoric, and then eventually they fall in love. This one I've heard is very confusing but very beautiful and very gay, and I'm willing to be confused to have some beautiful gay moments. It is quite short, but I think it's not going to be a quick read because I am going to be confused, but people seem to either really love this or just like don't understand it and don't really like connect to it or vibe with it, and I'm interested to see where I will fall, because sometimes if something's really confusing I'll just go with it and I won't really care, but then sometimes it really does bother me to not understand things and like it will stop me from connecting with the book. So I'm interested to see where I fall on that spectrum with this book. Then I have two e-arcs that I need to read. The first one is already out. My NetGalley ratio is appalling, honestly. So the first one I want to talk about is The Good Luck Girls by Charlotte Nicole Davis. All I know about this one is that this is a YA fantasy kind of western, and we follow 5 girls who all have, I think, some kind of magical ability that they have to hide, but one of them ends up killing a man and then they all have to kind of go on the run. And that is really all I know about it, but I've heard really good things from the few people who have read it. It's kind of underrated, but everyone who has read it says really good things about it. The author of this book is Black and non-binary, so this is one I'm definitely going to be like prioritizing to read soon because it's been on my TBR for ages and it just sounds really good. Then finally, for the books that I own, I have Cinderella is Dead, and this is by Kaylin Bayron, and this one I literally got this morning, so it's very new. I haven't hauled it or anything yet. This is a YA fantasy retelling, and we basically follow a main character who is living in this world kind of 200 years after Cinderella has married the prince, and now all of the teenage girls have to attend this ball where they will find their kind of male suitor, and if they don't find a match at this ball then they are basically never heard from again. And our main character really doesn't want to attend the ball, doesn't want to take part in this because she is in love with her best friend Erin, and so at the ball she kind of decides to flee and ends up in the mausoleum of Cinderella and ends up meeting up with I think some of Cinderella's like descendants, and they basically decide to hatch a plan to overthrow the king. I saw a description of this book that was basically a queer black Cinderella falls in love with Merida and ends up overthrowing the patriarchy, and I've not heard a better synopsis in such a long time. That sounds so good. So I immediately hit request and I got approved this morning, and I think this is coming out in August, so I will hopefully read it soon because it just sounds so good. Now I just want to quickly talk about some Sapphic books that are on my TBR but I don't actually own yet, so these are all kind of on my wish list or just on my like kind of Goodreads TBR that I hope to purchase or to acquire at some point and read. So most of these are YA, but the first one I want to talk about is an adult novel, and that is Cantoras, and this is by Carolina de Robertis. This is an adult literary novel, and this is set in Uruguay, and I believe this starts off in the 1970s, and basically the government at the time is really restrictive, particularly against homosexuality, and we follow a group of I think about 5 women, and we follow them kind of over about 30 years as they kind of discover each other and get to know each other and form kind of a safe space and a safe group with each other where they can be themselves and they can get into relationships with one another, and we just follow their lives and their relationships over about 30 years, which sounds really brilliant. I haven't read a lot of books set actually in South America, and South America is a region that I am really interested in the history of, so I want to read more books from there. I'm really interested in this author in general, and I've heard really good things about some of their backlist titles as well, but this is one that I am particularly interested in. I am waiting for the paperback release of this because the hardback is quite expensive, so I definitely want to get to this, but we'll just wait until the paperback comes out. The next one I want to talk about is also a sequel to a book I read last year and loved, and that is Ironheart by Nina Varela. This is the sequel to Cry's War, which is a YA fantasy duology. This is set in a world where there are Autome, and the Autome are kind of the ruling class over the humans, and so we follow 2 girls. One is the Autome princess, one is a human who works books kind of within the grounds of the palace, and she has a really big vendetta against the Autome because they killed a lot of her family, and so she has kind of a mission to kill the Autome princess, but then they kind of have an incident where she ends up saving her life instead, and they kind of get to know each other and fall in love. And it's so good. It's like an enemies to lovers situation, but the enemies to lovers is done so well. It's my favourite instance I've ever seen of enemies to lovers, and the politics of the world is really interesting. Like, for a YA fantasy, I think the world is just very rich and very, very interesting, and I was really invested both in the plot and the romance, which I loved, and so I'm just really excited to read the second book and to see how the story plays out and how the story wraps up. And I believe that is coming out in September. The next book I want to talk about is The Truth About Keeping Secrets by Savannah Brown. This one came out quite a few years ago and I wasn't super interested in it at the time, but the more and more I hear about it, the more interesting it seems to me. The main two things that kind of draw me in with this book is, one, it is Sapphic, which, like most books, draw me in just by being Sapphic, but the other thing that really draws me in about this book is that it's mostly about grief. So this is a kind of YA mystery. It's about a girl whose father dies, I believe, and he dies under mysterious circumstances, and the police really aren't willing to do a lot about it. They kind of just rule it off as like an accident or a suicide, I believe, and the main character thinks there's more afoot than what the police are saying, basically, so she decides to investigate it herself, and it does a lot with her grief over her dad, which really, really kind of appeals to me. I really like kind of explorations of grief in YA, and there's also kind of a Sapphic relationship in here. I believe the main character is bisexual, and that representation is own voices, so the more I hear about it, the more it really sounds like something I would enjoy, so I've definitely added it to my wish list, and I hope I can get to it soon. It sounds like it would be a really, really quick, really, really great read. We then have The Stars and the Blackness Between Them by Janada Petrus. So this is a YA contemporary. All I really know about this is about two black girls who live in Minneapolis. One of them is from Trinidad originally, one of them is from the USA, and really it's just about them kind of dealing with life. I believe one of them has a chronic illness and it's about their love story and falling in love. That's all I know about it. I saw this cover when I was in the States in October, and I nearly picked it up so many times and then just didn't because of the weight limit with my bags and everything like that. I've heard a few really good reviews about it since, and I saw it recently in Jessie's video. They did a video recently with some like queer black recommendations, and it just convinced me that I like need to make this a high priority. I need to get to this soon because it sounds so good and such a beautiful story. I believe the author is a poet, so the writing is meant to be really beautiful as well, and so it just sounds like a beautiful love story that I really, really want to read. The next book I want to talk about is The Midnight Lie by Marie Witkowski. This is a YA low fantasy, and I don't know much about the plot of this book at all. I looked it up on Goodreads. I can't tell you much. I think it is just about two girls who meet, and one of them convinces the other to kind of help them on this mission to find some magic, and that's really all I know about it. I've added this to my kind of wish list and TBR on Goodreads because YA Sapphic Twitter lost their shit about this book. Like, everyone I follow who like talks a lot about Sapphic books, particularly in YA, has like lost their shit about this book and like loves it and recommends it, and so many people I know just like talk about how good the romance is in this book. So I added it to my TBR because I didn't love the Winners trilogy, and so I was a bit skeptical when I saw this book come out. I wasn't like super interested, but so many people have been raving about it that I've decided to add it to my TBR. I don't know when I'll get to it, but hopefully it will be in the near future because so many people have been talking about it and I kind of want to know what all the hype is about. We then have Witches of Ash and Ruin, and this is by E. Latimer. This is a contemporary fantasy book, I believe, with a mystery element as well. So this is set in contemporary Ireland, and we follow a young woman who has OCD. I believe she's also bisexual, and she's also a witch, so she's part of a coven. I believe she's quite ambitious and wants to be kind of the head of the coven at some point. I believe this is about what happens when one of the witches within the coven is murdered at a sacred site nearby, and the kind of mark left at the site is one of a serial killer that has never been caught, and so it's about them trying to figure out like who murdered her and what has been happening, and there's like a lot of tension and everything like that. And I heard about this from Ashley from a Frolic Through Fictions channel, and she was raving about it, and I've seen like some mixed reviews, but it does sound really interesting, and it's inspired a lot by Celtic mythology, which I haven't read too much on, even though like I know a little bit about Celtic mythology. I live in England, so there's not like Celtic culture here, but I've been to Wales, Scotland and Ireland, and so I'm really interested in it. I think it'd be something that I would be really interested in reading. I love books about queer gals and I love books about witches, so it just kind of has a lot of elements that I normally really like in books, so I'm definitely intrigued by this one. We then have a book that is being talked about a lot right now, which makes me so happy, and I haven't even read it yet, but I really want to, and that is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This is about a young girl, I believe, who lives in this kind of very small white town in Indiana that is really obsessed with prom. She really wants to go to this kind of elite private college, but she can't get the financial aid for it, and so she decides to enter the prom queen competition because whoever wins the prom queen competition gets like a scholarship to whatever university they choose. And so it's just about her like going for that and her life in this small town in Indiana as a queer black girl. And I believe there's a really sweet kind of sapphic romance on the side, and so many people have been reading this lately and raving about it, and it just seems so lovely and so sweet, and I love the cover, and I just want to read some more YA contemporary. I don't have like a ton on my TBR right now, so this just sounds right up my street, and I'm really excited to get to it. And then finally we have two books that I've talked about quite a bit on this channel already that I am hoping to get soon. Like both of these books I'm hoping to get within the next couple of weeks. And the first of those is The Falling in Love Montage by Smith. This is a YA contemporary again. It's about a young woman living in Ireland. I believe her mum has early onset dementia and she is just going through quite a bad breakup with her ex-girlfriend, and so she's kind of sworn off dating and love for now. Then she meets a girl at a party that she ends up having a connection to, and so they decide to kind of have a summer fling and to reenact a lot of like rom-com tropes and moments and everything, but it's not going to be anything serious, it's just going to be a fling. But then they end up actually falling in love. Who was surprised? And I've just heard really great things about it. It sounds really sweet. It sounds like the perfect kind of queer summer rom-com, and I love rom-coms. I've listened to a few interviews with the author on like podcasts and stuff, and she just seems really lovely, and I just really am excited to read this. It's been one of my most anticipated reads for a while, so hopefully I can get a copy soon. So the final book I have to talk about for this video is The Henna Wars by Adiba Jagada. This is about a young Muslim lesbian girl who is kind of coming out to her family around the time of this book, and one of the main plot threads of the book is that her school is running this competition where the students can open a business, and I believe, you know, whoever has the most successful business wins. So she decides to open up a henna business, but then the girl that she's had a crush on forever also ends up opening a henna business, but this is kind of cultural appropriation for the girl that she has a crush on. So it's kind of about her dealing with that. It's a kind of a rivals, enemies to lovers story, which I really love, particularly with Sapphic books, and I've heard really great things about it. It's meant to be really brilliant and just explores a lot of themes that are really relevant. And I've also heard that the sister relationship in this is really great, and it's just one that I've had my eye on for ages. I think I remember following the author and seeing this pitch and just thinking it sounded so good. So the fact that I've kind of seen this book from its pitch and I'm now hopefully going to be able to read it soon is just so cool, and I'm just so excited to read it. It just sounds like a wonderful story that centres queer girls of colour, and we need more and more of those in the world, and I'm just really happy that this book exists and that I hopefully will get to read it soon. So those are all of the Sapphic books I have on my TBR, both ones that I physically own and ones that I'm hoping to get at some point in the future. Let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought about them. Let me know any Sapphic books that I've missed off of my recommendations video and in this video that you think I should have on my radar, because I am always looking to add more books to my wish list. Like I said, please check out the links in the description box down below. If you're able to sign some petitions or donate some money to those organisations, it would be greatly appreciated. I have done the same, and I hope you're all well, I hope you're all safe, and I will see you soon in my next video. Bye!